Hey, this is Matt, and in this tutorial I'm going to cover some additional effects functions within Audacity. So the first thing to do is go in and expand your plugin library. On the Audacity page, this is the official Audacity site, there are some optional free libraries that you can install. Follow the step-by-step instructions for each of them. There's some that are PC only, and there's some that are Mac only. So, be careful of that. The audio units are for Mac only. VST plugins can be a little problematic for Mac users sometimes. It can be done. Don't sweat those now, but definitely get the Nyquist, the LV2s, etc., and we'll have all sorts of fun. Now, the other important tool is the manual. There's a link to this too, and it basically tells you what all the crazy parameters do for each of the effects that come with Audacity, and a couple of the extra ones too. So if you click on any of these, for example, reverb, it'll show you what your interface looks like and what all the things do. So there are links to these two within the weekly lecture. Definitely check that out. You might want to read through the weekly readings first before you actually get in and get your fingers dirty with the effects. So the next thing to do after you've done the reading and have an idea of what is going to happen when you process audio with these things is to get in and have some fun. So we have Audacity here. The best thing to do is use your own voice or a piece of music that you're familiar with. That way you have a known point of reference, so you can really get a handle for how each of them affect audio. I'm just going to record myself. Hello, this is Matt. I'm going to talk a little bit. Wow. And now now that I have a piece of audio in there, I can get in and destroy it. So we have done some work with EQs and the compressor on previous assignments. And now we are going to check out some of the other effects. Now, obviously, there are a whole bunch. If you scroll down now, you'll see there are all sorts of effects in there, and it's a rabbit hole. You can get lost. I've tried to keep it simple so we can focus on some basic modulation type effects, the phaser, the flanger, and the chorus, some time-based effects, which is the delay or the echo, and the reverb, the pitch shifter effect, and then some distortion effects. And then that's a pretty good start. A lot of the other fancy ones are really some sort of combination of these older, they're basically models of old analog effects. Okay, so the first thing that we should probably do is check out a phaser, for example. This is one of the what they call modulation effects. So a phaser is really easy to find. It's right here. And you see a bunch of sliders and LFOs. Wow, what is that? LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. And stages. What is this? Well, get into the manual, and you might want to have that pulled up at the same time so you can read about it before you start sliding the sliders around. Or you can be like me and wiggle some things around like this and see what happens. So you just print these like this, and you can listen back. Hello, this is Matt. I'm going to talk a little bit. Okay, so yeah, but it helps to do a little research first, then you don't waste so much time. So the other ones can be a little maddening, for example, the flanger and the chorus, because you won't find them on the main menu here. Well, you'll find them down below. If you scroll down to F, there are a couple flanger effects, flangers here. And if you go down to multi-voice, chorus, there's a cool chorus effect here. Definitely explore those. They're all sorts of fun, but you're going to have to get in and develop your own relationship with them. You know, a lot of the terms that people use in terms of explaining these are pretty subjective. Things like swooshing sounds or underwater. And these things mean different things to different people. So you're going to have to get in yourself and play with them. So those are the big three modulation type effects. The reverb and the delay and echo are the time-based effects. So time-based means that you're basically just playing with time. You're taking a signal and repeating it later. So here's a plate reverb. Do the reading and you'll find out what that means. There's a basic reverb that's actually really good that comes with under our Audacity. You might want to explore that one first. It basically recreates room reflections. The basic one does. And it's nice because it prints it and it's not super processor intensive. Some of the reverbs in other DAWs, when you are editing in real time, can really suck up your processing power. But these you get to print and then forget about it. We get to have fun with them in assignment 3. Actually, all these effects. So knock yourself out with those. Now, let's see. Yes, the pitch shifter. This is one of my favorites. So the pitch shift effect basically just changes the frequency without changing the time. Remember for the last assignment, you're actually able to stretch time without changing the frequency. But if you go here and change the pitch, you can do things that they call pitch up or pitch down. And before I tweak any of these parameters, let me give you a basic overview of some of this interface means. The top part, it relates to music in terms of notes on a piano keyboard, and then the bottom half of the interface is basically just frequency. So you can move numbers in either one, and the other slider will shift. So I can change this slider and notice how things up above move. So in terms of on a piano, if you're familiar with music, semitones or half steps are basically just adjacent keys on a piano. So anytime you talk, your voice is operating at some pitch. Well, if you can move it up, and any sort of positive number will move it like this is 4 adjacent keys on a piano up. If you put a negative sign in front of it, it'll move it 4 keys on a piano down. Or you can work in percent changes or frequency changes here. So one important fact to know here is what an octave is. And an octave is basically a doubling or halving of a frequency. So if you have a frequency of 440 hertz and you go up 1 octave, that would be 880 hertz, exactly double. And why is this important? Well, piano keyboards operate in octaves. All the keys and the names of the notes are duplicated every octave. They repeat. And so if it's just a good fact to know. It's something in terms of octaves we touched on briefly. In terms of the spectrum, a lot of spectrographs and EQs operate in octaves. You may or may not have noticed that, but if you look at the numbers, they're generally each adjacent number is either double or half what the other one was. So have some fun with this. Obviously, the negative ones are really cool. Let's go negative first here. Go down -6.
Hello, this is Matt.
So you can make things sound crazy that way. I'm going to undo that. Or I can go up and print.
Hello, this is Matt.
The last one that I want to talk about is the distortion effect. Now over here I have a little piece of paper that has some additional names here that you might want to check out. So go in and check out the plate reverb. I mentioned the multi-voice chorus. Dual tape decks is a cool flanger. But there's several overdrives. There's the Chebyshev distortion. There's the fast overdrive. So drive and distortion are generally synonymous. Decimator is another type of distortion effect that is a bit crusher. And you really have to just get in and see what it does to waveforms. Basically what it does is it adds what they call clipping or soft clipping. I'm going to create a sine wave here to explain what that means. So here's just a basic sine wave at 440 hertz. I'm going to zoom in on it, and there's our little sine wave. Now if I add some distortion to it, I'm going to use the Chebyshev, and let's see, put it somewhere in the middle here and print it. Notice that it sort of smooths out the top of my hills and it kind of flattens out these valleys. This is what they call clipping, and soft clipping. So it's basically mimicking the imperfect response of old analog gear, tubes and transistors. And a long time ago, they noticed that even though these older devices didn't work properly, they actually made things sound kind of cool in the way that they distorted signals. And in the old days, some things couldn't reproduce the exact waveform, and so they would truncate it and then add these little ripples. And these are basically just replicas of old analog imperfections. And what they notice is that your ear perceives these ripples and truncations as higher frequencies. You can read up on distortion. It's fascinating. But people have spent hours and many millions of dollars tweaking and coming up with cool digital replicas of old analog gear. And they can sound really cool. They can actually sound terrible as well. So that if you over apply, it can sound like static. But with just the right amount of distortion, you can create really subjective words like warm and fuzzy, and there are all sorts of ridiculous words that creamy that people use to describe their distortion characters. So you're gonna have to get in there and experience it for yourself. Definitely check out drop a piece of music in there and see how it messes with that. For kicks. Now, the other one that I mentioned on that little piece of paper that I pulled up there is the Decimator effect. So what the Decimator will do is downsample. So you can go to Effect, Decimator, hiding down here. And here's one thing. Make sure the slider is all the way over to the right, because you want your sample rate to be the sample rate that you're working at. If the default, I think, is actually over to the left, and it will destroy the audio signal in a bad way. So this is now we're working at 24 bits. I can downsample this to 8 bits, for example, so you can hear what it would sound like if it was coming through an old gaming console from the 80s. I'm going to print this, and I'm just going to hit play. So you can hear there's weird static in the background. Was that good or bad? You'll have to be the judge of that. But experiment, see what happens when you go down to 4 bits or 12 bits or 16. And this is a good one to play with, because you can sort of get acquainted with how different bit rates sound. So if you're working at 24, is 16 even noticeably worse to your ear? But there's a little brief overview of some of the distortion effects. There are a whole bunch of them in there. Knock yourself out. Make sure you do the reading this week. Make sure you take the quiz. So the quiz is 12 questions. You have an hour to take it, plenty of time, open notes. But just focus on the basic effects that I have laid out for you, and read the little snippets from the manual and the wiki pages, and it should be no problem. And experiment. This is a week to experiment. Next week, we'll be applying all of these cool things, and you will have all sorts of fun.